and it might help you to kind of place where Chinese diet therapy fits in the grand scheme of things. It's kind of good for helping support your body, support its basic functions. And it's very simple. It's not hard. It's not a complicated thing. It's not like you've got to go to the highest mountain and pick this thing at a certain time when the sun's facing it, and that's, you know, and get this thing and brew this tea and then you drink it and dance around 5 times. It's not like there's some weird thing that's some trick to it. It's these simple kind of habits, doing this same stuff every day, all the time, keeping things. So Chinese medicine loves regularity. Like, our body loves to be regular. And then that will promote, like, sleeping's regular, your eating's regular, and then that's going to promote, like, regularity of, like, your digestive system, your bowel movements, things like that. Hi, welcome back to the Chinese Medicine Podcast. I'm Marie Hopkinson. I'm a Chinese medicine practitioner, an acupuncturist, and a herbalist. And today I thought we would talk about Chinese diet therapy and what its place, what its role is within the greater context of Chinese medicine, and for you as a patient, where Chinese medicine diet therapy kind of sits and where it can fit in to your overall health, depending on what kind of what your health needs or your goals are. And so I also wanted to say Happy New Year to you and your family and your friends. Thank you so much for your support on this channel throughout the year. It's really growing and I'm very, very happy about where we're going. It got some really good stuff in store for us. It hasn't been an easy start for lots of people to the new year. Australia has had a really terrible time in terms of the fires and the devastation that's happened around our country. So if you're wanting to know more about how you could help, if you're from another country and you'd like to help out, or you're maybe from Australia, if you haven't, I mean, if you're in Australia, you wouldn't know, you'd know about it. It's a massive issue. It's not just like a little fire. These fires are really hard to put out because they've escalated, and they, like, a lot of the fires situations are like we're gaining back control now as I'm making this video. But what happens is the winds can change really easily, or conditions can change, like if it's really hot, and then that stuff escalates, and it's just not so much just the fire, but like the devastation that it causes to the towns and things like that. And it's been amazing to see people just come together in terms of like giving and donating, and doing a lot of charity and stuff like that. Now I did some the herbs company that I buy most of my herbs from, they set up like a like a GoFundMe type of thing when the fires first started. So it's not just like they just happened around Christmas. I know a lot of the viewers that watch this channel and listen in are from America, and there's quite a few from the UK. So you just might not be aware, I guess, of how big it is and what it's kind of an issue it is. But like, I organised a couple of donating fundraising things in September. That's when the fires had kind of started around the rural New South Wales areas. The herbs company I buy my herbs from in Port Macquarie, that town hosts like one of the biggest animal hospitals for koalas in Australia, like the main one. So if koalas are injured, that's where they go. And it's not just so much for the animals. I mean, it's sad that lots have died, but the ones that are left, they obviously need to be cared for, but they also need food, and a lot of their food has been wiped out. And that's the issue now with koalas. Like, they only eat those certain type of gum trees. Where I live in Western Australia, we've been relatively lucky that the fires haven't come that close to our CBD area and the main towns, I guess, surrounding Western Australia, surrounding where I live. They're more way out in the rural areas of Western Australia. So where I live is one of the bigger, what's the biggest state. But like, it's just devastating for our country, no matter where you are. But it's like a lot of people in the CBD areas, especially Sydney, have just been overwhelmed with smoke because of the fires burning in the rural areas. Like, it's so bad that the smoke is that smoke pollution is affecting people's lungs in the CBD and those kinds of areas. And it's just like, visibility is really hard to see when it's all smoky. You can't drive or you can't see properly. And so, yeah, there's a lot to be done. There's a lot of ways you can help. There's some charities. I'll put a link to the charity things below if people want to donate to things like the Wires Foundation, which is they look after the wild animals. rehabilitate them, the koala hospital, those kind of places. And obviously for people and things like that. It's been great to see the people coming together just to give, you know, and support. So this isn't a rant about the fires. I just thought I'd mention it because a lot of my viewers are from outside Australia, and you might be interested to know or to kind of get that kind of update. And so obviously look at the news, and you can see how big Australia is compared to other countries. It's a massive amount of land that's been burned. It's not just a little deal, it's a massive deal. And then, you know, there's also the worry that people might have because of the war that's happening, possible war that's happening because of the Iran situation with America. So it's not an easy time for people, but I still want to be positive because that's the nature of my nature and the nature of this channel. So today we're going to be talking about Chinese diet therapy in its general sense. How can it fit into your lifestyle? What place does it have? Is it a treatment for conditions, or is it something that you would use as how does it fit in? Is it something as important as acupuncture and herbs, or you know, where does it fit? So let's think about in general, there's two things that Chinese medicine practitioners want to do. On one hand, they want to keep you healthy and they want to stop you from getting sicker. That's what Chinese medicine is fundamentally about. And then on the other hand, it's about like treating the illness that you have that's wrong with you now, so that that doesn't escalate or cause more detriment in your body and then cause you more harm later on. So let's say you've got a cold or a flu. Chinese medicine treats that ultimately quite seriously, because if you don't sort of resolve that in a proper way, you may have more detriment down the track in your body later on. If you are living in a healthy way, let's say, now this is where Chinese diet therapy comes in, because it teaches you how to generally be healthy. And if you are living in a generally healthy way, you can kind of have deviations from that path from time to time without too much detriment in your body. But if you are living in an unhealthy way, then you may find that you get chronic illness in your body that doesn't resolve very easily. So one role that Chinese diet therapy plays is to teach you how to be generally quite healthy, so that it's normal to get sick, right? We're not saying if you stick to Chinese diet therapy principles or the general principles of Chinese medicine that you'll never get sick, and that's health. Health is not that. Health is not the absence of getting sick. It's actually considered quite healthy in a Chinese medicine sense to be able to get sick, to be able to get a fever, let's say, in terms of getting sick, but to be able to get better quickly from that or recover fairly well from that, and then to be able to go on. Now, the other side of Chinese diet therapy is that your body is just generally going from a state of a state of decline as you age. That's the aging process. And so if you treat your body well, then that decline might just, you know, be a steady decline from 0 to 100, like from when you're born to 100 years old. If you tax your body more, let's say, which means you are robbing your body of its vitality through not living well, not sleeping very well, putting more strain on your body with the diet, and we'll talk about what those general things are, then that can tax your body, and that may make you age quicker, right? So if you're looking for how to be healthier in 2020 because you want to age, like slow down the aging process, then diet therapy is something that you could consider to kind of do that. Now, the first video you want to watch, if you haven't watched already, is the video I put on this channel called Why Eat Mostly Cooked Foods. And in that video, I'm basically talking about the idea of warm, cooked and moist versus cold, raw and dry. And those two concepts are like opposing things. So your body likes warm, cooked and moist. So in a very general sense, when you're eating food, when you're creating foods for yourself at home, you're going shopping, you should be thinking, are these things generally like that? Am I eating mostly warm, cooked and moist, or cold, or am I having too much cold, dry and raw? Then secondly, seasonally. So what is good to eat seasonally is different. Like in winter, if you're in America or UK or Asia, it's winter now. Then it's going to be a matter of like warming foods, more soups and stews. You probably feel like you want to eat a little bit more food. you're going to bed, hopefully you can sleep for a bit more in winter. Whereas in summer, it's like the opposite of that. You want lighter foods. You can have a bit more raw. You can have a bit of lighter foods and smaller meals. Intermittent fasting, we're going to talk about that a little bit in this video, where that might play its role as well. So in a general sense, diet therapy can keep you healthier, help you recover quicker when you do get sick. Because if you stick to that clear, bland diet, that Qing Dan diet, which is the warm, cooked and moist, but clear, bland in that. So I've got heaps of videos on this channel about dampness, because it's something that people seem to be quite interested in. And the clear, bland diet would be the antidote to dampness, basically. So I'm going to talk about something called congees, or rice porridge or porridge in this video as well, because I think that's going to be very useful for people wanting to follow that Qing Dan diet, or that clear, bland kind of diet. So if you bombard your body with too many nutrients, too many flavors or whey or density, then that overwhelms your body, and that's too much. So overuse of anything, right, is not good for you in a Chinese medicine sense. And so simple food, simple eating, not overeating. The Chinese medicine has this saying, like, eat till you're 70% full. So just don't be overfilling. Don't overfill your digestive system over and over and over too much. Like, that will make you also, like, that will be detrimental to your stomach and your spleen, which is your earth element, which is the fundamental, the core of how your body's going to make its energy, make its nutrients and absorption and things like that. So let's talk about congees real quick. Now, what's a congee? Congee is a rice porridge. Traditionally, it'd be rice porridge. It could be porridge made out of any grain, technically. We'll start with rice, and then we'll talk about other things you could use instead of rice. So it's basically 7 times water, or 7 times liquid, to 1 times the grain. So if you use a cup of rice, you'd use 7 cups of water in a pot, and you boil it. And so you boil it slowly. Usually you can do it on the stove in a quick way, just like you boil normal rice. But you have to be careful that it doesn't stick to the pan. Now, you could make this in a rice cooker, or you could make it in a slow cooker, a crock pot. I think the generic name is a slow cooker. That's how I usually do it. Slow cookers are great. And congees are very good for people. One is infants, like babies, when they're weaning onto foods. So you would make a congee to start them off, just start having foods, and then you might put meat, or you could put chicken stock, or you could put other things into the congee and cook the meats, or cook the food, cook the veggies and things like that with the rice. Or you can have, like, if you've ever gone to a Chinese restaurant, especially the ones in mainland China, for breakfast, this is what they do for their buffet kind of breakfast. They'll have a big pot of hot, like piping hot congee, which is usually, they'll have one big plain one, and they'll have something with a weird kind of meat kind of thing in it. And you scoop out like the small bowl of that, and then you might have some like spring onions, and you might have some pickles or different kind of things, and you would put those things raw on top of that piping hot congee and mix it in, and it just kind of, the heat of it kind of cooks it. So when we say, like, on one hand, warm, cooked and moist foods, it doesn't mean cook it to oblivion. Like, the heat of that congee, that piping hot congee, is enough to kind of, the steam of it is enough to kind of cook. It steams it, it just warms it a little bit. And when something's warmed like that, it activates the qi of the food, and you can really smell the aroma of the food, and that's so nice because it's fresh. That aroma often then activates your digestive system. So something that people would put in congees as common is like ginger. You could make like a ginger paste, or you could just put some pieces of ginger into it and cook it with it. You could use condiments that have flavour if you want more flavour. But if you are recovering from illness, so let's say you're an infant, you don't need much flavours and things like that. You just want it very bland and plain, and you're adding, usually for weaning kids, you're adding one thing at a time and making sure the baby can tolerate those foods. I have another video on that, what should kids eat, the diet therapy for children. That's something else you could watch if you've got a kid, particularly babies. Like, you're looking at weaning a baby from milk to solid food. How would Chinese medicine do that? So the video you want to watch on that is called Why Eat Mostly Cooked Foods. So the other use of congee, the most common use, is an adult that's recovering from an illness, especially where you've had something where you've had a lot of vomiting, or you've been off your food, you've had no appetite, or you've had a big fever, and you need to coax your digestive system kind of back into working again. And so congees are good for doing that. I would just start with the plain rice one, so 7 times water to 1 times rice, all in the pot together. That's very bland, and then you could add something into that if you wanted to at the end, like light leafy green kind of veggies, or things that don't need very much cooking. Or let's say you had carrot and you just cut it, slice it very thinly, like almost peels of carrot. You could add that in and it would cook from the piping hotness. But then you've got the options of having chicken stock, let's say, in the congee. So you could cook the chicken bones or the beef bones just like you would cook up a stock, like you would make the bone broth. You could do that with the rice, or you can cook up your bone broth separately, have that liquid that's kind of like a thick gelatinous kind of mixture, and you could place a few spoons of that bone broth into the mixture when you are cooking up your congee. Whichever way works for you is okay. If you make a bone broth, and you could have multiple uses for that broth, so that would be one way to kind of do it. But if you're in a hurry and you've just got that chicken carcass hanging around and you want to cook it up with the rice, you could do that. If you're worried about the bones getting into the rice and not being able to drain them and get rid of them, you can put it all into like a muslin bag, a cloth bag, and cook all the chicken within that, and then take that out, and then all the liquid is kind of there, and you can pick through that to get the meat off it if you want to, but that way the bones aren't all inside the congee. So chicken stock congee is a really good convalescing, recovering kind of food, and it's also high in calcium. That's one reason why Chinese typically use that as a food for kids versus dairy foods, to give kids, like kids do need calcium, but they don't necessarily have to get it from like milk and dairy products, as when I was a kid, that was, bombarded at my parents, like, you need 3 serves of dairy a day from our dairy corporation in Australia, which is nonsense. You don't have to have that. There's other ways to get calcium. Yeah, the correct information is you need the calcium, but you don't have to have dairy. Anyway, so the clear bland diet, that Qingdan diet, is one of the ways you can kind of support your body through illnesses or through difficult times. And let's say you're a person that wants to do a fast, or you want to do like a cleanse, let's say, because it's New Year. Like let's say you want to cleanse your body for New Year, and detox, right? So the Chinese medicine healthier way of doing that would be going on that very simple, basic diet. So just stay away from all processed and packaged foods. And if you do that, like, then you won't be getting those exorbitant flavors that are so delicious. Like, don't get me wrong, they taste delicious, but often they've got lots of trans fats, or they've got sugar and salt added in, or all of those things to kind of make them taste yummy and make you want to eat them more. So if you went onto this clear bland diet, you could do it with congee. Now, sometimes I will tell my patients to do this if they really want to reset the flavor, like their taste, because they have incredible cravings. Like if you crave a lot of sweet, like let's say you're like, oh, I need coffee. Like before I quit sugar, I quit sugar once for a year and a half, maybe 2 years. I think definitely a whole year I had no sugar. But before that, I used to have this horrible habit of like needing a coffee and a biscuit or a cake every day. Like in the afternoon I wanted coffee and something sweet, and it was always like this association between those two things. And like, that's okay if it's once a week or once every so often, but if that's every day, like then next thing you know, you're having coffees and cakes all the time, or coffees and sweet things. That wasn't like giant cakes, but just that need of sweet. Like if that's something that you've got, like you're craving this sweet flavor, or you crave salty, like you really need this strong flavor. This will be hard to do, but it will help you reset the flavor sort of mechanisms in your mind. And it's got to do with the dopamine reward system that we have. So the more you have of something, the more you need to satisfy that craving, right? And so, you start with a few pieces of chocolate. Next thing you know, you're eating like half a block of chocolate, and you haven't even sort of thought about it, or a whole packet of biscuits, or a whole packet of crackers, something like that. When you before that, and you have a few and you'd be like, wow, this is really, I can really taste this flavour. So basically just go for 3 days with your plain rice, and by the way, it's white rice. There I can go into more detail about white rice, but it's not brown rice that we would use in a Chinese medicine sense. So you would do your congee, and so you could just make one every day. I mean, rice is pretty cheap, so just make a fresh one every day, even if it's just you eating it. And then you would add in, you could either use like the steaming basket. Sometimes with the rice cooker, they've got a little steaming basket at the top and you can put your veggies in there, or you could just lightly steam some. And so you just take any fresh veggies, so you can broccoli, cauliflower, carrot, squash, parsnip, the root vegetables if you want, because they have a lot of flavour, turnip, parsnip, that kind of stuff, beetroot, carrot, cabbage, any vegetables you like. And you just have that for 3 days. So you mix and match different things. So you're basically just having veggies and rice. If you could just have it without the rice, you could just do that. You could just have steamed veggies for 3 days. And what will happen is you might feel really terrible for a couple of days. Like if you're used to having a lot of carbs, the rice will be sort of replacing the bread, kind of carby stuff that you have. And so you'll still get that satisfaction from that. But it will help you reset your flavour, the receptiveness that you have to flavours, like your need for cravings and that kind of stuff. So you do that for 3 days. And then you tell yourself, look, I can just go back to whatever I want after this. But you probably won't. You probably won't want to. Hopefully you won't want to. And hopefully you'll have a bit more of an awareness. But I find it's easier to do these kind of diet things like that if you just tell yourself, look, this is only going to be for a few days. But often that will change your habits, and obviously you wouldn't have alcohol, and you try not to have coffee or the other kinds of stimulants. Like if you really needed something, you could have tea, green tea. There is some caffeine in green tea, but it's not very much. It's quite low compared to black tea. Certainly black tea is much lower than coffee. But if you couldn't go off that, it would still be beneficial just to have those steamed veggies and the rice. And you just have that for every single meal you have that, like 3 meals. And so one thing with Chinese diet therapy, so we've said you need warm cooked and moist foods, you need a clear bland diet, you need to pay attention to what you should be eating in seasons. That might be different, it's going to be different foods in winter and summer. So you're going to pay attention to those different things. So the flavours of the foods, you want to reduce those things down. Now after that you can start to add those things in, and you can say, right, I'm going to have a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Everything in Chinese medicine is about moderation rather than elimination. Okay. Now we'll talk about why should we have white rice and not brown rice? Okay, because the general principles of Chinese diet therapy is to support the spleen and stomach, the earth element of our body, support that and help it to digest what it needs, help it to do its job, which is digestion. And in one way, it's better to have things that are easier to digest. It makes it easier on the body. Things that are more difficult to digest are harder. And so there's this idea in Chinese medicine where white rice is like, well, you've removed the husk of the rice, so it's easier to digest. You don't need that. It is a contradiction. There are a few contradictions. And if there weren't contradictions, I guess you wouldn't have such a different principle thing. But this is something I find patients struggle with to get their head around, especially if they come from a more macrobiotic, because they love brown rice, or Pritikin or whatever, they love brown rice. That kind of background, and even like the whole foods movement. And this is something where I've mentioned this book before, The Healing with Whole Foods, Paul Pitchford. He seems to think brown rice is the way to go. I've never seen Chinese eat brown rice. Like in the whole of China, they don't eat brown rice. They've always eaten white rice. And before the introduction of so much Western food there, Chinese people were relatively healthy. And I don't think we need to eat a ton of rice, but it is something where the Chinese diet, as in when I say Chinese diet, I mean Chinese medicine diet, is based around the idea that, you're going to be active enough for what you're taking in. Like you're active enough in your daily life to warrant to eat those carbs. Now, like a lot of people in Western society, they don't exercise enough, or they just don't have as much active kind of job. They sit a lot in their desk, or they sit at, we drive to work and then we sit in our desk, and then we drive home and then we sit on the couch. And that's kind of a common Western philosophy of life, right? Western way of living. And maybe you don't need as many carbs when you're kind of doing that, and maybe you should just do some more exercise, or maybe you should just cut down the amount of carbs that you're having. So that's something you need to discuss with your practitioner as an individual, or something to think about. But in a general sense, white rice is better than brown rice in a Chinese medicine way, because it alleviates the pressure on our digestive system, whereas brown rice kind of would be seen as something like giving you something extra to digest that you don't need to. Another job to do, right? And then the thing I was trying to think of before was like, we need to eat regular meals. So your stomach likes full and empty, full and empty. It doesn't like grazing all day long. So if you do that diet that I suggested with like the detox, putting my fingers in the quote things there for the people listening, the detox diet in a Chinese medicine way would be the 3 days of the clear bland stuff. So the just vegetables and rice. You need to eat regularly. So breakfast, lunch and dinner, pick 3 times a day when you can eat, or 2 times a day, whatever suits you. Which brings me into the ideas of intermittent fasting. So Chinese medicine, I was reading an article the other day about intermittent fasting, and they were saying, well, just like, you don't eat from 8 o'clock until 9 a.m. It's like, well, that is what you should be doing. That's not really called intermittent fasting. That's probably just normal life. Just through modern society, convenience living, all this kind of stuff, like working late, we tend to have dinner late, or people snack all night long and then they go to bed, these kinds of things. So like, the optimal thing would be to finish eating at a certain time and then have that 12-hour break before the next day. So let's say you stop eating at 8 p.m. and then your next meal's at 8 a.m. That's 12 hours. Let's say you stop at 8 p.m. and then you don't eat again until 8 a.m. There you go. You've had a perfect 12-hour break, and that would be beneficial. Now, for some people that want to lose weight, they may need a longer break, or they may choose to do that, because then that means they're consuming over the period of time that you are eating, and consuming less calories. And those are all things that you need to discuss with your practitioner individually, or do your own research on that sort of stuff. Like, this channel is not a replacement for medicine. It's not a replacement for seeing your individual practitioner. And so I just want to encourage people, the best benefit you'll get out of Chinese medicine is by seeing a practitioner. So by being under the care of a practitioner who's going to look after you, with giving you treatment for what's wrong. But then you can go away and do these things on your own as well, the diet things by yourself. So hopefully this video has been useful and helpful to you, and it might help you to kind of place where Chinese diet therapy fits in the grand scheme of things. So these are the things that it's really good at, the stuff I've told you in this video. It's kind of good for helping support your body, support its basic functions. And it's very simple. It's not hard. It's not a complicated thing. It's not like you've got to go to the highest mountain and pick this thing at a certain time when the sun's facing it, and that's, and get this thing and brew this tea and then you drink it and dance around 5 times. It's not like there's some weird thing, there's some trick to it. It's these simple kind of habits, doing the same stuff every day, all the time, keeping things. So Chinese medicine loves regularity. Like, our body loves to be regular. And then that will promote, like, sleeping's regular, your eating's regular, and then that's going to promote, like, regularity of, like, your digestive system, your bowel movements, things like that. And so that's a good way to kind of help yourself into health in the new year, to try to start with those things. If you don't have a regular diet schedule, like you don't eat breakfast or you don't eat lunch at the same time, it depends on what you do in your day, I think. So there's some things where, like, when you were back in school as a kid, especially like primary school, you did all these things because the bell would ring, ding ding ding, and it's like, it's morning tea time, it's lunch time, it's dinner time. Well, your parents didn't ring a bell, so it was dinner time. But everything was kind of laid out for you in this regular pattern. And then as we get older, we can do what we want. And it's easy. Like, I know for me, I'm the kind of person that's like, because I'm a business person, I don't have a 9-to-5 job. And so I love that. Like, I wouldn't have it any other way. But the downside of that is that there's more opportunity for not to have a regular lifestyle. So you kind of have to put that in there yourself. And that's something that you might just need to work on this year, as something you can do. So to get more towards health is to kind of think, okay, what do I need to keep more regular? What can I do that would like, what little habits can I do? I mean, if you listen to really like people that are successful, that's what they'll tell you is it's a key theme that keeps coming back is that it's not just like you don't just do one thing and then, oh wow, I achieve success. It's like these regular things that you do regularly, that you do every day, or you do on a regular basis. The habits that we have, those regular things, that keeps us on track to success. And that's the same in our health. So it might be things like drinking coffee. If you have 8 coffees a day versus 5 coffees a day, then cut down to 3 coffees a day. I know people that do that, and I used to be one of those people where like I would just have the coffee machine on all the time and just keep drinking it all day long, like from the moment I got up to literally the moment I went to bed. I didn't drink alcohol or anything else. I just used to drink coffee, and that was like, it was fine at the time, but it's not a good habit to have, right? It felt like my body was fine, but I wasn't a beneficial thing for me. And sometimes that can happen, like we can be doing something where we're not really feeling a detriment to it, but it's not really beneficial to us, and you don't notice the detriment of it to you until the detriment's already there, and then you have to go and get treatment or do something else to change it. So I just want to encourage you that there's little habits you can change and little improvements you can make that make a big difference in the long term. And so that's something that's good to think about. How can you be healthier through your diet, through these little habits and things like that. Where Chinese medicine kind of fits, or where this fits in the grand scheme of things, it'd be more like, okay, your diet and lifestyle kind of keeping you healthy, it helps you recover. If you get sick with some serious problem, or you've got a problem that you want treated, like there's actually a condition already caused there are some textbooks, like here's a common textbook of Chinese diet therapy. Here's another one, this Book of Juk. So this is just all congee recipes in here, where they talk about treatments for conditions with foods or herbs and foods together. It's very hard to treat those things with foods. It's not the stock standard. You won't be getting the best result you can get. It's like it can support what's happening, but certainly, like from my perspective as a herbalist, I would prefer patients to, like, not prefer them, but I see much more benefit in taking herbs than taking little teas or digging around with like foods to treat a problem. Because if that problem persists, if that problem keeps going on in their body, that could cause more issues down the track just because it's lingered on and lingered there. So better to just get onto the proper Chinese herbs, get that issue resolved, and then you can use diet therapy and things like that alongside it. Now, there are some TCM or Chinese medicine practitioners that would advise you different herbs or foods you could use at home, or like maybe herbs you could take as tea or something like that. And that those things can be really beneficial for certain conditions, or certain things that, like, there might be a chronic thing that you have. And so a certain tea, like some people love chrysanthemum tea when it's hay fevery time, let's say, that kind of stuff is very common. And so they just drink that, like that's very common in China. Restaurants, they start serving up chrysanthemum tea because the weather's warm. And so there might be some things that your Chinese medicine practitioner will be able to advise you of in your specific situation. But for the most part, diet therapy is more about keeping you healthy and sometimes just chipping away in the background at these chronic conditions that were originally caused by diet. So on the flip side of things, the role that Chinese diet therapy can play is that you could go to a herbalist. They could give you the herbs, you feel great, but as soon as you stop taking the herbs, the condition comes back because you're actually causing it by the diet. The foods are causing it. So dampness is a really common one where people they don't want to give up alcohol. They love drinking beer, but that's so dampening, and they find like they have to come to that conclusion, I think, on their own, where they realise, hey, when I do this, these symptoms happen. That's not good for me. They're common things. Like, so I've had some patients where if they eat cheese or dairy, they get a kind of a headache here because it's a kind of dampness, like a foggy headed feeling or cloudy headed, or they just don't feel. They might very easily get phlegmy if they have milk. That's a direct correlation between a food causing a problem. That can be something that can happen. And one of the things is that very common that I find is people, including myself, like you might not be aware that something's causing it if it's just there all the time. So if you go onto this little cleansing thing that I said, like the 3 days just eating clear bland foods, mostly vegetables, a little bit of rice for 3 days straight, and you cleanse your body of sugar and processed foods and things like that, when you start eating that stuff again, you'll notice what it's doing to you. And that can be a really good thing, because then you are aware, oh, when I have pizza, I actually feel bloated. And you just were feeling bloated all the time and you didn't realize it because you're having, maybe not pizza, but you might be having bread so regularly, or you might be having, yes, cheese that's, you know, might be causing that, or yeah, these kinds of things. So I'm not saying you have to give up all that stuff, but it just, awareness is key, because if you don't have that awareness, you just might be keep bogging down that thing, and then spending heaps of money on herbs or acupuncture or medications or other things to kind of resolve these problems that could be resolved by changing our diet and changing our food that we eat. So I hope this has been useful and helpful to you. If it has, I'd love to hear your comments down below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't before. Or you can leave a review on the podcast platforms. That would be super helpful. So if you're on Google, Amazon Play, I think it's called Google Play, Amazon, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, all those places, particularly on Apple Podcasts, if you're listening on there, it would be really helpful if you jumped on there. I know it's a bit of an effort because I've done reviews for other people's podcasts. And yeah, you have to sign in and all that stuff. So I appreciate the effort that you go to, but if you can leave a review, that would help me a lot. I just do this out of the goodness of my heart, really. Like, I'm just making these videos to help the community of people at large, and help people like yourself. So I really appreciate the comments and the emails and the things that people send me saying, hey Marie, this has helped me, and that's been useful and that's good. So I really appreciate that. I'm glad that I can help you, and look forward to helping you in the future. So thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you again on the next video.